So, today we are at the end of our ordinary time journey through Mark's Gospel. And as we have witnessed on several occasions, we have today in our Gospel reading yet another healing, this time the healing of a blind man, a blind beggar, Bartimaeus. But you know, it isn't just Bartimaeus who is suffering from blindness. Over the last few weeks, in Mark chapters 8 and 9 and 10, we've seen Peter arguing with Jesus, seemingly blind to the true meaning of Jesus' identity as Messiah. We've seen all 12 of Jesus' apostles arguing about who is the greatest. Again, apparently blind to the true meaning of greatness in the kingdom that Jesus was ushering in. And last week we saw James and John approaching Jesus privately and asking to sit in the places of greatest authority. Again, blinded by the lure of status, rather than understanding that following Jesus means servanthood and suffering. In fact, did you notice Jesus asking Bartimaeus exactly the same question that he asked James and John last week? And the question goes as follows: what do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? There's that servant again, Jesus the servant. Bartimaeus asks for his sight back and his request is granted. But James and John's request to sit in the highest places is not granted because it is so utterly out of sync with the values of Jesus and God's kingdom. And it's as if Mark is asking us a question here. Who is more blind? Is it Bartimaeus, or is it rather James and John and Peter, and indeed all the 12 at this point? Just as Jesus is setting his face towards Jerusalem. And then comes another question on the back of that. As Jesus' followers today, are we equally blind? Do we get the point of Jesus and following Jesus as equally wrong as Peter and James and John and co? And at the end of the day, are we really any different from them? Today, as we near the end of 2021, we have become very aware, I think, of two particular catastrophes that we have been blindly stumbling towards as a church and as a world. There are so many challenges facing us, aren't there? But I think there are two in particular. And compared to these two, well, COVID-19 hardly even figures at all. The first catastrophe, of course, is that of climate emergency, which is now becoming so acute that as the forthcoming COP26 conference in Glasgow approaches, there is the very real feeling that the decisions of our world leaders could be make or break in terms of our survival and the survival of many species on this planet. Yes, there have been voices warning us for decades, not least His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. And I don't know whether you caught any of those interviews at the beginning of the week with Prince Charles in his beautiful arboretum, speaking very graciously, but also I think you could hear the frustration in his voice of how he has been speaking about the need to look after the planet for decades. But very few people, it seems, have been listening. Maybe like the crowd in our gospel reading, we've written voices, those warning voices, off as annoying and inconvenient for far too long. And in this sense, we have all been blind, and we have blindly stumbled into the potential catastrophe that we now face. That's the first one. The second one that I think, and that many say we have now been blindly stumbling towards for decades, is what is now being called something like the breakdown of civil discourse. Following the second assassination, because that's what it was, of an MP in 5 years, and there's a headline in our papers today that 51 of our MPs have gone to the police this year because of death threats. I hear a question hanging in the air. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you've voiced it. Lots of people asking, what kind of a world are we living in? What kind of society are we now living in? Anger and violence seem to have become the norm in terms of how people communicate with each other. Yes, aided and abetted by social media, particularly Twitter. But it's much deeper than just a social media problem. This is a problem that goes back before 1998. We seem to have reached a point where people can no longer disagree graciously, but instead they very quickly see each other as enemies. They resort to name-calling. Only weeks before the killing of David Amos, we had Angela Rayner, deputy leader of the Labour Party, describing, well, pretty much every member of the Conservative Party as scum. Well, I wonder how well she's now sleeping. But it's not just our politicians. If we're honest, it's all of us. It seems to be everywhere. People not listening to each other, people unable, it seems, to empathise with one another, people quick to treat each other as enemies rather than friends. So now suddenly the message is, oh gosh, we've had another death of another MP. We need to be kinder towards one another. We need to make the discourse more polite and more civil. And yes, that's going to last about another 3 weeks again, and then we'll be back to normal. And I ask, as with the climate emergency, are we too late? And how do we change? Both of these catastrophes into which we have blindly stumbled, certainly as a nation, and possibly as a world across many nations. These two catastrophes speak, I think, of a deep spiritual malaise in our nation and in our world today. When it comes to the deep, deep connections between ourselves as human beings, when it comes to the deep, deep connections between ourselves and our planet, and these are connections that our faith constantly reminds us of. We have, it seems, dangerously and seriously lost our vision. And neither of these catastrophes are going to be fixed easily. They're not going to be fixed by fitting a few thousand heat pumps, or by telling each other we all have to be a bit nicer and kinder towards one another. As followers of Christ, we know in our heart of hearts that these deep spiritual disasters, this intense spiritual darkness, can only be tackled when we, like Bartimaeus, are desperate enough to cry out to Jesus, the Son of David, have mercy. have mercy. We want to see again. And not only to pray that ourselves, but to encourage everyone in our lives to do the same. Only by crying out to Jesus constantly will we see anything or anyone in their true light. Only by crying out constantly to Jesus will we be able to walk a true path, a true road through life in the footsteps of Jesus. Because left to our own devices, like Peter, like James and John and all the others, we so quickly go astray. We quickly think and behave as if power or status are the things that really matter. And before we know it, we are harming our neighbours and our planet rather than helping them. We need to make the prayer of Bartimaeus our daily prayer. Lord, I want to see again. But what about Jesus' response? Well, did you notice what many recognize as the three most important words in our gospel reading? Those three words are, Jesus stood still. In fact, in some translations, it's two words. Jesus stopped. Jesus stopped. He did not pass Bartimaeus by. Even though there were many encouraging him to do so, he stopped. He stopped, he listened, he attended to Bartimaeus' cry for mercy. Jesus, it seems, always has the time. Jesus, it seems, always has the capacity and that attentiveness to hear us. And just as he listened to Bartimaeus and his plea for fresh vision, so we can be assured he will listen to us and to our pleas, and we will see again, and we will follow Jesus again on a truer road. I'd like to end today, and indeed to end this whole sermon series of Christ-centered and Jesus-shaped, by sharing a prayer poem. And it's entitled The Vision. It comes from an organisation called 24/7. I came across these people a few years ago. They were based at Ivy Church in Didsbury. I don't think they're there now. But it's a global movement. It's a global movement of prayer. Daily prayer. Constant prayer. And boy, do we need that. Well, always, but especially at this time. So from this organisation, 24/7 Prayer, do go and look them up. It's this wonderful prayer poem. And it's entitled The Vision. And I think it encapsulates not only what we're thinking about today, but so much of what we have seen in Jesus over the last few weeks and months. The vision. What is the vision? What is the big idea? I open my mouth and words come out like this. The vision? The vision is Jesus. Obsessively, dangerously, undeniably Jesus. The vision is an army of people. You see bones, I see an army. Free from materialism, they laugh at 9 to 5 little prisons. They could eat caviar on Monday and crusts on Tuesday. They wouldn't even notice. They know the meaning of the matrix, the way the West was won. They are mobile like the wind. They belong to the nations. They need no passport. People write their addresses in pencil and wonder at their strange existence. They are free, yet they are slaves of the hurting and dirty and dying. What is the vision? The vision is holiness that hurts the eyes. It makes children laugh and adults angry. It gave up the game of minimum integrity long ago to reach for the stars. It scorns the good and strains for the best. It is dangerously pure. Light flickers from every secret motive, every private conversation. It loves people away from their suicide leaps, their Satan games. This is an army that will lay down its life for the cause. 1,000,000 times a day, its soldiers choose to lose that they might one day win the great well done of faithful sons and daughters. Such heroes are as radical on Monday morning as they are Sunday night. They don't need fame from names. Instead, they grin quietly upwards and hear the crowds chanting again and again, "Come on!" And this vision will be. It will come to pass. It will come easily. It will come soon. How do I know? Because this is the longing of creation itself, the groaning of the Spirit, the very dream of God. My tomorrow is his today. My distant hope is his 3D. And my feeble, whispered, faithless prayer invokes a thunderous, resounding, bone-shaking, great Amen from countless angels, from heroes of the faith, from Christ himself. And he is the original dreamer, the ultimate winner, guaranteed. Amen.